Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, the big thing that we go over is how to utilize biometric data to create sustainable habit change so that ultimately you can realize the potential that you have internally. And if you've seen any of these videos, we talk HRV, we talk intermittent fasting, we talk health, nutrition, hydration, mindset, all of these things and how they ultimately impact us internally. And so today we're going to go deep into alcohol. And I know a lot of people are like, well, when I drink, I don't get hungover, but it doesn't really affect me. I'm able to perform. I want to show the difference between why, when we start tracking, we have a better understanding of how these things actually start to impact us. So again, if you're new here, click the link right here, follow, subscribe, also hit this little bell so you'll be notified whenever a new video comes out. We put these out weekly, ultimately to make sure that you can optimize yourself. So without further ado, let's dive in. I want to take a look at alcohol. Now, we all know that alcohol doesn't obviously lead to high-end performance, but what is the actual impact? And is there a difference between wine, mixed cocktails, beer, all these things on our body? So as I usually do, I have case studies that we can actually go off of, hard data that we can look at. And anytime that we take alcohol into our body, what ends up happening is it increases our resting heart rate, increases our respiratory rate, increases the speed at which our lungs contract and expand. It increases our vasodilation, thus driving our HRV downwards. Alcohol is a stressor. It's a stressor on our body, and thus it reacts accordingly. And so I had a client come to me the other day and say, hey, Justin, this is kind of what I end up seeing all the time when I'm utilizing alcohol. And so if you can see here, and I'm actually just going to switch screens so that I can start drawing for you guys. You know how I love to draw. So what we actually see here is his HRV. And when we're looking at his HRV, we notice that average of 36 over the course of 3 months, we do see that there's a pretty even keel, right? So it's really not going up or down in any which direction, but rather it's been pretty stagnant, pretty steady. Now, the important thing to know here is that alcohol consumption is something that he's doing usually 2 to 3 times a week. So it's pretty regular. But for a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's just a typical day, typical week. But we're not able to see an increase because it's a stressor on the body that's added onto his stress at work, his stress at home, his stress through his relationship. He's traveling around the world a lot again. And so all of these stressors are adding up and not allowing him to truly build capacity and improve in his overall health and performance. Now, outside of that, if we take a look at what is truly going on internally with this individual, it's really unique that I started to ask him some questions. So what's the difference between when you have a cocktail versus when you take in wine? And I wanted him to start to really think about it. And so if we look at it, when he took in wine, his HRV dropped more than when he took in cocktails. And so I started to ask, okay, so was it just a habit? Is it something that you have that when you drink wine, you consume more? Is that what it is? He's like, no, it's typically 2 glasses of each. And so this asked us to ask greater questions. Okay, so when you take in wine, what is it that you usually feel? And he starts to go, well, I usually get stuffy. I usually have a harder time breathing, and it usually gives me, I usually wake up in the morning with a greater headache. So that one leads me to want to go back to here, where we look at resting heart rate, and holds true. We see that when he takes in wine, that resting heart rate spikes exponentially, more than when he takes in cocktails. So again, leads to a better question. Why is that? There must be something internally that's creating further reaction or inflammation that's creating greater stress on this individual's body. So we did, and again, if you go back to that other video that we did in cellular dysfunction and food sensitivities, and we really dive deep into what's going on cellularly, what you're sensitive to, what causes inflammation in the body, inflammatory markers within the gut biome, we noticed that within wine, the phytochemicals that exist and the antihistamines actually create issues within his body and thus drive inflammation up. Because they drive inflammation up, they take his respiratory rate and it drives that up. It also drives his resting heart rate up, thus making the sleep he gets at night much worse and thus impacting his HRV. And if we look at this, we all of a sudden see that if this individual wants to start having a cocktail or a beverage, which we come over even further, and by knowing that over the course of 3 months, we really did not see an increase or decrease in HRV. It was really just there. He was just kind of surviving. It's not optimal. It's not optimal for him to truly get to where he wants to be. And when we discuss what his goals are, advancing in fitness, wanting to go and complete a couple Spartan races, running the New York City Marathon, running the Chicago Marathon, these things are not helping him get there. And so by understanding this and knowing this, we can now start to take some changes and start to make some changes and be more, make it driven to more of the values that he's trying to do. So we're going to engage in purposeful action, but also knowing that, oh, when I take in a cocktail, something like a Moscow Mule or a margarita or vodka soda or whatever it is, although it is still going to have an impact on his recovery, on his hydration levels, and a stressor on his body, it is going to take lesser of a toll than if we go with wine. Because when we did his cellular nutrient dysfunction test, as well as his food sensitivity test and DNA test, we found that the phytochemicals and different nutrients found within wine from grapes, from fermentation, created a reaction internally that increased the stress load, increased the respiration rate, increased the inflammation, that ultimately created more issues for his body to get to truly create recovery with. And so it held him back. And so knowing this, we can now make better choices. If we are going to have an alcoholic beverage, make sure we go with the cocktail, and to use wine sparingly, because it's going to be harder on your body. And if we do that, we know that we have to go through different detoxification processes the next day. And we're probably going to have to stay away from other foods that cause inflammatory markers, because if we're just overloading the body with inflammatory markers, what's going to happen? It's going to drive all of these all the inflammation up in the body, creating more issues from a recovery stance. Remember, we are not overtraining ourselves 95% of the time. We're under recovering. And because of that, we can focus on those 8 controllables: our self-care, sleep, nutrition, hydration, mindset, environment, all things that are going to put us in a better recovered state that will truly enhance these choices that we're making. So when you drink alcohol, again, knowing that it's going to cause a little bit of an issue when it comes to recovery within our body, it's going to drive our HRV down. Whoop says one of the big things they come out with is the change in behavior of alcohol consumption drops about 65% when you become more aware of what it does to your body's HRV and the stress load in which it handles. So just by knowing this, we should be able to be more aware. Elise talks about it all the time. Being aware of the behavior is the first step. The moment we become aware of what alcohol is doing to us, we can now make the changes and the choices appropriately. But even more so, when we know specifically what forms of alcohol give us greater inflammatory markers internally, we can make greater choices when we do choose to indulge, especially as we come up to holiday time. So with that, guys, remember, knowledge is power, but it's only powerful if we apply it. So step out into that newfound space, look into what's causing inflammation in your body, understand what's happening so that ultimately you can make better choices, better habits, take you from that plan to that routine, into that rhythm to create that new instinct that happens internally. So as always, success is different, be different, and own it. Be sure to subscribe, like below, comment. We'll make sure that you get everything that you need so that you can own your habits and truly realize your potential. Go own it.